Welcome to our webinar of the day. So we're here with Hannah. Hannah is a OSCE trainer. Would you like to introduce yourself, Hannah?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Yeah, my name's Hannah Ames, and I am a UK nurse, and to start off with, of 20 years, which seems like a really long time now, doesn't it? And I've been I still am a university lecturer as well for 7 years, and I've been an OSCE trainer, program lead for a local trust, and now I run my own OSCE training here in Plymouth and also online.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. And then also Paul from the Devon Alliance.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Paul from the Devon Alliance, and I'm the administrator for the team. So welcome.
Thanks, Paul. And I'm Laura Travers. I run our social media pages and also our pastoral programs that I look after you from after you've had your interview all the way to when you're placed in country. So nice to see everybody. So welcome, Hannah. Thank you for joining us.
That's okay.
So let's talk about OSCE. So what sort of things do you do so if I was to contact you and say, let's do some OSCE training, how do you go about it?
I think the first thing I'd want to find out is obviously which OSCE you're going to be doing. So adult, child, mental health, learning disability and midwifery.
Yeah.
The next thing I always do is find out when you plan to take your OSCE. So have you got it booked or are you planning to book it in the future? Because you really need, especially for adult OSCE, the huge amount of content, you really need a good 6 weeks to practice.
Yeah.
Ideally after you've had your training. It's a very difficult ask to do your training and go straight into your OSCE. So then I will try and work back then and see how many sessions we need to do, what your level of knowledge is as well. Because it's really important to remember that you are a registered nurse and you've got lots of knowledge and skills.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people forget that, don't they? And identify kind of which areas you feel you want like more work and more focus on. And then I'll look at building the training really around you as well. And I'll tend to focus on what I call the big stations, so things such as the assessment and implementation station, which is part of the API. These are quite big stations which carry quite a high referral rate as well. And then start to look at breaking down for adult all of the 21, 22 clinical skills that there are as well. And really to get the most out of training is to try and practice as much as possible, but then come to me and practice in front of me, and I can give you all that feedback. And also I can look at ways where we can shave off a little bit of time here, maybe where we're doing practice which isn't necessary, and really linking it down to the marking criteria as well.
Yeah, okay, great. So how have you found your training? So is it predominantly online that you do or face to face?
Yes, I do both actually. I've got a mix of both. So I do online, which can work really well. So if you're in a different country or not local to me in the Devon and Plymouth area, we can do that online. And because a huge part of the OSCE is actually verbalising the practice, you have to verbalise everything. So as a nurse, you most probably be quite comfortable with the practical side of giving an injection or taking a blood pressure, but it's the verbalization which is key, and which often is the biggest cause of fail because you haven't verbalized your practice. So that is something you can really easily do online. So online training does work quite well as well. And I've also got all the equipment at my home in Plymouth, so I can do face-to-face training, and I try to offer one-to-one training rather than going and having a huge amount of students, because you need that one-to-one feedback really for successfully to pass that OSCE is absolutely key.
Yeah. So speaking of passing, you've got a few success rates, haven't you? A few success stories.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So I did the local training for a local trust. So I took that on when I was employed as one of the local universities, and I turned that training around, which had quite a low pass rate. I want to say something around 0 to 20%. And I took it up to over 51% first time pass rate and a 99 point something second time pass rate. And you might think, oh, 51% first time pass rate, that's not very much, but that is above the test centres pass rates and the NMC national average as well. So I used a lot of my experience as an educator, so I come from an education background within nursing as well, so I used a lot of theory around education and how you support people to learn, really, rather than just trying to just teach them to learn and memorise the criteria. Is not always the most effective way of learning.
Yeah, no, totally get it. So, we were talking about the 51% pass rate first time, and that kind of brings into the legacy OSCE and the newer OSCE. And I know the newer OSCE's been in since, was it 2022 now that it changed?
Yes.
I think it was
Yeah.
22. Yeah. So have you found that it's more complicated? How are the nurses finding it?
Yeah, it was definitely a step up in content, particularly for the adult nurses. The clinical skills grew quite significantly. The professional values, evidence-based stations came in as well. And there's 30 different scenarios between those two stations. So it's a huge amount to learn. And also, the addition of other conditions within the API scenarios as well. So yeah, the content increased massively. And so when you've got a huge increase in content, it's a much bigger task to learn and remember, but also to perform that under pressure in an exam condition.
Yeah. So how many stations are there now that they've got to learn before the exam?
Yeah, so the exam in itself is 10 stations, and that's
Yeah.
broken down into the API, which is 4 stations, but there's 12 different clinical conditions or diseases that the nurses need to learn, ranging from, end of life to acute asthma or depression and anxiety. This is for adult. Child, it's less, it's 2. Mental health learning disabilities, it is less again. And then clinical skills, so they get tested on 4 clinical skills. In an adult, it's 21 or 22. I should know that off the top of my head. That's a huge amount of clinical skills. Some of them are written based, some of them are medication based. Yeah, and it was really, and all of them are done to a really strict time limit as well. So you don't have a huge amount of time to think in the OSCE, unfortunately. So you need to be able to go in there really confidently, knowing exactly how you're going to approach that station.
Yeah.
And then there's what we call the 2 written stations. So professional values, which is, testing us around understanding really our role as accountability when we go onto the register, and identifying poor practice or practice which possibly breaks the law as well, and showing to the NMC that we know our professional responsibility to report that and what we would need to do in terms of action steps for that. And there's 15 different scenarios around professional values as well. And then there's evidence-based practice, again, another written station. So in this one, the candidates are given a piece of research, and they have to pick out the key information on that research and present it in a way that a patient can understand. So it's all about showing our practice is evidence-based, and we can give the correct information to the patient to make their own decision. And again, there's 15 topics from that one as well. So it's a big ask.
Gosh, yeah. I can understand why you would say 6 weeks to get all the training done. That's crazy. And with the writing ones as well, as you said, it's time limited, and you can't actually go back and make any adjustments, can you, after the time's run out?
No, very strict about time. If you continue writing after the time was stopped, then it could be considered as malpractice, which is taken very seriously. They have introduced the Viva for the practical station. So if you have demonstrated competence throughout that station, but maybe you've missed something, the examiner can, for one station only, ask you a question to try and see if you did know that what you missed, and then they can pass the station through. And that came in about October 23, but is starting to be a bit more used now as well, but only in your practical stations.
That's interesting. Okay, because I have heard of, I have heard in the past that they change the color of the pen that you use for the written stations. So if you've got a black pen and you go back and you change something that's in blue, then obviously they will then see that you've gone back and changed it. So
Yeah, they do.
you really have to stick to those timings.
Yeah, and they take it very seriously. It's like falsifying documentation. So you get failed across your whole 10 stations,
Oh
even if
gosh.
you pass the other stations. Yes, if they deem you to have done that falsification knowing that it's wrong, if that makes sense, and they will, and then you have to repeat your whole OSCE. You get a whole set of 10 different stations. And your final decision about going on to the NMC register goes to a registrar who actually makes that decision. So it is really serious. So if you notice a mistake, just leave it, put that station behind you, and just focus. It's better to fail one station than to be in that malpractice situation. Yeah.
Definitely. So it's, yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to go and have a trainer that will teach you all of these things as well. If you're doing it independently or doing it through a trust, I mean, a trust will obviously put you through the process. But if you are doing your OSCE independently, it's definitely worth thinking about having a trainer. It's not that you don't know the stuff, it's just that you have to present it in a different way. So super interesting.
And are all the
So
tests done on the same day?
Yes, so the whole exam is quite intensive. So it can be 2.5 to 3 hours to get through the 10 stations.
Right.
So again, if you can get to a trainer and do a mock exam, that's really, really helpful to be put under those conditions, because it's exhausting doing an exam for that long. And being under those mock conditions, especially if you're practicing by yourself at home, you might be a bit more lenient on yourself, but being under those conditions and getting the feedback, I always say feedback is the most important part of passing your OSCE, and that's whether you go to a big training centre or whether you have, practicing by yourself. You must get feedback all the time, because you don't pick up what you're not doing or what you're missing when you're doing it by yourself.
I guess the more you practice, the better you become at the stations for the exam. So making it sort of, and the feedback would give them exactly knowing where they're going wrong or what they're doing sort of incorrectly, just to get it right next time. But yeah, sounds really tough.
Yeah, definitely. And I always say to my tutoring students, record yourself on your phone, just set it down to record. You can go back and listen to that then and mark yourself off on the marking criteria. Self-assess yourself is a really good thing. Or my tutoring students will send me that recording via WhatsApp, and I'll go through, mark it off and give them feedback. So that's a really good technique, because you might think you're doing that station really well and you're getting all the key points in, but you can go back and think, oh, I just missed this little bit. And unfortunately, if you do miss a key bit of verbalization, then it is a fail, unfortunately.
Well, that's where your guidance would be sort of, great for anybody that sort of, uses the service sort of thing. So brilliant.
Really good. So what are your top tips to prepare for an OSCE?
So my top tips is, don't forget you are a registered nurse already. I think I see a lot of OSCE candidates who become really overwhelmed with it and kind of lose a lot of confidence in their nursing ability. So always remember you're a nurse, always draw on that nursing knowledge, because you're not being asked to do anything outside the role of the nurse. Yes, you're being asked to do it under time, and yes, you're being asked to maybe do things and verbalize things a little bit different, but always think, and if you get stuck in your exam, I always say to my nurses, what would you do in practice? Is it safe? And can you justify and rationalize why you have done it? And if you stick to those 3 points, you will do okay in your OSCE. You won't do anything stupid, hopefully. My other top tip is time. Like I said, you do need to give yourself time. It's a huge amount to learn, and be able to confidently, deliver that under exam conditions. And the only way you will do that, like you said, Paul, is through a lot of practice. So give yourself lots of time. 6 weeks to 8 weeks, I think, is really needed for the content of what you've got to do. The other one is to really know the marking criteria. You are marked on the marking criteria, so you don't need to put in anything added extra. You haven't really got time to do that. So sometimes it goes a little bit against what we might naturally do as a nurse. Maybe in terms of our communication, we might want to communicate a little bit more, spend a bit more time with the patient, but in reality, we don't always have time to do that. So really, really familiarise yourself with marking criteria and stick to that, and don't put in unnecessary steps. I see lots of unnecessary steps like checking expiry date on gloves or checking expiry date on hand gel. Those things aren't needed. Stick to the core marking criteria. Other one we've talked about it is to get feedback, whether that's from, your partner, husband, wife, someone you're working with clinically, a trainer. You must get feedback. As trainers, we can see what you're missing. We can also look at your approach. I talk a lot about having an order in your head for that station. So when you start that station, you know exactly what you're going to do, because the time will go so quickly. So I'm going to do this bit, this bit, this bit, this bit. And all my YouTube videos always talk about that station breakdown and putting, breaking the station down into 5 or 6 key parts. So that is really important. My other one is to try and just keep your nerves under control. And I know it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I think even if I went up to do the OSCE, I'd feel a little bit nervous about it, because it's a big test. But try and keep your nerves under control. Take a few deep breaths before that station starts. You always get a briefing before each station starts, where the examiner will show you any equipment, give you an opportunity to ask any questions. And the test centres sometimes say, you know, that the candidates don't make use of that. And then they get into the station and they become a bit stuck and they want to find out something, and you then can't help them. So that little bit of, I think you can have 10 minutes before each station. Use that time, go up, and even if you're really familiar with that blood pressure machine, go up and check that blood pressure machine and just stand there and go and get your order of that station in your head and take a deep breath and then start. And my other top tip is to read your paperwork really carefully, especially when we're under time. We can misread things, and that can be really crucial. So documentation is absolutely key for the OSCE. It's not just the practical, it's making sure you document everything really clearly. And I think my other top tip would be just try and practice as much as possible, and it should start to feel a little bit boring and repetitive really, and then you're ready to go for your exam. But it does take a huge amount of practice, and if you haven't studied for a long time, so a lot of nurses coming over can be quite experienced and they're not straight out of uni and might have been a bit of a break since you've studied, and that can be quite hard to get back into that study routine. But take little chunks of it at a time, especially the adult OSCE. It's so big, so you're not going to conquer it all in a day or a week. Just say, you know, today I'm going to do like 3 skills and I'm going to really focus on those, and tomorrow I'm going to pick 3 more skills, and try and make it manageable for you.
Okay, no, that sounds really interesting. So I've heard a lot of chatter about test centres and people saying I'm only going to go to this test centre because I heard that they've got the better pass rate. What do you think about that?
I think all the test centres, and I've had nursing candidates go to all the different test centres now actually, and I can say that the feedback is exactly the same, and they marked the marking criteria, and that's why it's really important to follow that marking criteria, and they all mark to the same. So I don't think there's a difference. You know, some people will go to one because they think that pass rate slightly higher, but I think you have to look at it in context. You know, how many of those candidates are traveling there, how many people are going from, you know, a nearby test centre, a training centre, or nearby trust, which is putting through a lot of training. Yeah, I think that I would go with one which is cheapest to travel to for you, especially if you've got to retake. You don't want to be, you know, flying back over to Ulster, you know, to retake one station that's massively expensive. Yeah, easy to get to with the minimal stress. You don't want to be arriving somewhere which is difficult to get to, or a long journey, because you've got to take additional time off work maybe to travel up the night before. So yeah, I would say that all test centres mark the same, and they all follow that marking criteria.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we actually had a meeting with the NMC when we raised this, and they said like Oxford, for example, is closer to London Airport, so people will like fly in for a couple of days, take their OSCE. If they've failed because they've not done the prep and they've not obviously seen a tutor, then they'll have to come back and take it, which then brings the sort of marking criteria down for the whole centre. So, you know, just think about that when you're booking it. Just because the percentage of the pass rate might be lower, it's because it's closer to a hub where people can just pop in and take it without potentially having the support of a hospital or the support of a tutor to then like not pass first time for their OSCE. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So how long do you think after passing the OSCE does it take to get the PIN?
It depends if you've got all your other requirements for the test of competence and the NMC registration complete. So it is important to be on top of that. Obviously, your CPT or the English language requirements. Normally, people do those first and leave the OSCE to the end. And additional checks in there like occupational health and DBS and police checks. So I think the NMC say 30 days to get your PIN. Sometimes I think it can be a little bit longer, but if you've got any kind of bits missing in your application, then it does put you back down the pile, unfortunately. So make sure, if the OSCE is your last bit, make sure everything else is complete, but it should be 30 days. And it's great when people email you and say they've got their PIN. It's such a great moment. I absolutely love it.
Oh, it's the best. So we've watched the webinar. You talked about some amazing stuff. How do we find you online?
Yeah, so you can just search me, nursetutor.com. I've got a website. I've got my YouTube channel, which is taking off and got some lovely feedback on that. So that's Nurse Tutor Tutoring with Hannah, and I'm putting loads of free advice and training videos on my YouTube channel because I think it's really important to for patient safety, really, that you're getting the correct information. And you shouldn't have to, I don't feel you should pay for information for patient safety and care. When you come to me, what you're paying for is my expertise in supporting you, mentoring you, giving you feedback, giving you a study plan, and being able to practice with someone. But you can, so there. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, again, nursetutor.com, or you can email me, hannah.ames@outlook.com as well.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Hannah. I'll put all of that on so everybody can find you. But you don't charge really crazy prices either, do you?
No, I don't. And I think it is really expensive to do your OSCE training. You're looking at maybe £1,000 for a week training. The nearest test centre to where I am is £1,000 for 5 days training. That's in a group. And so predominantly I do one-to-one. That's what I like doing, or small groups. And so you don't need as much training. I think you might think, oh, she's only going to offer me 3 days, which will most probably be at half the price of a test centre of £1,000. And you might think, oh, 3 days not very much, but actually 3 days one-to-one is way more effective than 5 or 10 days in a classroom of 30 or 40. I had Pablo, who came to me recently. He did 2.5 days of me one-to-one, and he went off and he passed first time. And so I think and you also have to think about the cost of retaking. So it's £350 every retake, isn't it? So sometimes it's worth investing a little bit more in that initial training, because you don't want to be going through multiple, 3 retakes. It's very, very expensive, plus your travel, plus your time off work if you are working, plus potentially childcare. All those other things adds up as well. And whether you do 5 days in a test centre or 2 days with me, you still need to practice as much as possible and give yourself that time.
And that's why you've got those resources online. And then do you give extra resources as well?
So I give more of my teaching resources. So my scenarios, so I've got the API scenarios and the medication charts, professional value scenarios that you can practice, like care plan examples, and study guides. And my next little job is to get those together in some proper books that can be
nice
next. So and you get that, and I give ongoing support. Like I said, a lot of my tutoring clients will WhatsApp me, and I can just answer questions. So you normally have quite a lot of questions when you start really practicing for the OSCE, because you're not, because it is quite a lot. So so I give that ongoing support as well with my tutoring clients.
Oh no, that sounds really good, and I think it's definitely the way forward. And I know that I would rather do 3 days one-to-one than 5 days in a class of 30, definitely for a successful pass. So I think what you're doing is great.
Oh, thank you. No, it is good. And because you are one-to-one, if there was a station that was really tricky, then it's okay to spend more time on that, because I've not got a set schedule of having to get 40, or 20 students through that station, before lunch or anything like that. So you can be really flexible with that, because some nurses will come with their own strengths in their particular areas, and some stations we just need to recap on, they're quite happy with, and others we need to spend a lot more time on. And I think that's maybe the benefit of doing one-to-one and tutoring, to do that. And also, I work around shifts, so I don't run set training weeks or dates or anything like that. So, like with Pablo, he booked a week of work before his test, and he came to me, did his 3 days, 2.5 days intensive, and went. And then another nurse I've been doing online in Sheffield, she's got a young family and 3 children under 5, so she's very busy and working.
Oh my gosh.
So I just split her sessions into short 2-hour online sessions, which we could just do in the evening or when she had childcare. So when I'm not tied into specific dates either.
That's really good. And
it's so much more personalized, isn't it, for them, sort of thing, and that's what to me sounds like the key, is that personalization of what you can see the difference would make them pass first time as well, which is obviously the key for everyone, sort of thing. So but it sounds fantastic.
And you specifically specialise in the adult and the children OSCE?
Yeah, I do adult and children. Children's very similar to adult in terms of marking criteria. And from my lecturing, I've taught across adult and child. Mental health is a little bit more specific, although there's some adult skills in mental health which I'm able to support with, and I don't go anywhere near midwifery because I'm not a trained midwife.
Completely different. No, that's really good. Paul, have you got any extra questions that you want to ask?
No, I think Hannah's, answered any questions that I would have had if I was going to
Yeah,
think about doing this. And yeah, I mean, as I just said before, I think the key is that personalization, and the one-to-one must be so much more beneficial for the candidate than going in a group, because I just see, like you said, and you're always on call. It's the extra special care that you take as well, I think, that is the key. And it may only need the 3 days rather than the 5 with a group. So, and that makes it probably a little bit easier for those coming to do it as well, sort of thing, not having to spend all their time doing the training. So, and I'm sure it's quite fun as well.
Oh yeah.
have you got anything that you want to add, Hannah?
No, not at all. Just thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about OSCE training. I love supporting all my international nurses. I have a huge amount of respect for them because, I'd never go over to India or Africa or New Zealand and retrain and work in a different country. So, and they come with so much experience and knowledge. I think they're a real asset to our healthcare system. Definitely, whether they go into the NHS or into private, and they have a huge amount to offer as well. So yeah, it's always delightful to practice them, and and it can be life-changing for them to get their NMC pin and get into the registered nurse role. So
Definitely. 100% agree. So thank you for joining us, Hannah. I'm going to pop all of Hannah's links and websites and YouTube channels in the sort of in the blog below. So thank you for joining us, Hannah, and yeah, we'll see you soon.
Lovely.
Thank you,
Thanks for
everyone.
having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.